Oh, shoot. Okay. I can't seem to share it. Share. Oh, it says host disabled participation screen sharing. So I'm not able to share because I'm not the host. Would I be able to be co-host or anything? Or is it just
Yeah, I can
host?
do that. I can make you co-host.
Okay. I just want to be able to have flexibility to pull it on my laptop. Okay. Bailey, did you want to be a panelist or did you not want to? You can put it in the chat box. Oh, so Ashley, the Facebook page that we put it on is not our group page because our group page is private. And so we made another page to make it public. And so that page just got sent out today. So I can try to
Hello?
send you a request. Hello?
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Can you make Bailey a panelist as well? She has, she's pretty good at speaking too. She knows most of the.
Florencia Guanca wanted to speak, so they currently have speaking rights.
Okay.
Their hand was raised.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead and speak.
Do you think Israel is a legitimate?
Oh, you're muted.
They sent a really inappropriate message in the Q&A, so I don't think they have anything to say.
Do you think Israel is a legitimate state? Do you think Israel is a legitimate state, or do you support?
Oh, you can kick him out. I think you're the host, so I think you can just kick them out. All right, sorry about that, you guys. Bailey, you're now in. Ashley, I will try to send that to you. Let me just get the agenda shared right now to get this meeting started. Okay. All right. I can't see all of you, but I can see some of you. So with the agenda, we had stated this meeting starts at 5 today, and it's regarding Arizona State University students voicing their concerns to administration on withholding the CARES Act funding from the CARES Act. So the Coronavirus Aid and Relief and Economic Security Act. And so our mission as our group has grown over time. Since March, we wanted Arizona State University to send all ASU students emergency support from the 31.8 million CARES Act funding immediately. All the ASU students enrolled in spring 2020 who had their personal and educational life disrupted by coronavirus pandemic deserve some financial support from the CARES Act funds. So here today, the ASU administration that is joining us today, they can introduce themselves as well, but I'm going to give them a quick run through. Some of them are here, some of them are not here yet due to being in other meetings right now. So there's Joanne, she's the vice president at ASU with the student services, and she is actually who President Crow sent to listen to us. So we sent a letter to President Crow, Michael Crow of ASU, as well as all the dean of each college at Arizona State University to request President Crow, to request a meeting with President Crow and American Indian leadership, and as well as ASU's administration leadership to sit down at this conversation so we can resolve this issue that we see is a big issue. And so Cassandra, as well as she's the dean at ASU of students on Tempe campus, she's joining us. Jacqueline, she'll be joining us a little later. She's within the university student government. She's the president. And there's also Elizabeth. She's ASU's assistant director of associates to students. So Joanne, did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. As you've already heard, as Jessica shared, is President Crow did receive the letter that was written, and his office asked me to respond on his behalf. And so I am here today to listen and to provide the information that I have about the CARES Act, which is being distributed in the upcoming semester in the fall. And so we'll certainly talk through some of those things that I might be able to help to about the
Sorry,
CARES
it's a
Act.
little late, yeah.
Yep. And so thank you for the invitation, and I look forward to hearing what you all have to say.
Yeah, thank you. Cassandra, did you want to go next?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. And again, thank you for having us for today's conversation. Similar to Dr. Vogel, I'm here to listen to you all. I know I tried to participate on Wednesday, was it? And so there were some difficulties. So I did not want to miss out on the opportunity today. Very much interested in hearing what you all's thoughts are, and we'll be taking notes with regards to that. So thank you for doing this and for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. As the other administrations do come in, we'll be able to join them onto the panelists as well. So as again, any attendees that want to communicate with us and let us know your input or your insight, or have a comment you want to make. Again, there's the chat box available, as well as you can raise your hand and we will click on you. So as we're moving forward, let's go back to the agenda. And so with the meeting minutes, we have an introduction part. So we would like for each student that has joining us to be able to introduce themselves. So now is the time, if you are an attendee and you would like to introduce yourself, you can raise your hand. We'll start with Eric or Bailey. Did you guys want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Bailey Lecomte. I'm an enrolled member of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe in South Dakota. And I'm a grad student at Arizona State University, and this will be my second year in grad school.
Yeah, my name is Eric DeWorm. I am a grad student as well in the Masters of Science in American Indian Studies. My focus is on social justice issues as well. Also part of AIXA, the American Indian Graduate Student Association. Thank you for inviting me in.
My name is Jessica Antonio, Yate, Noda Dene Nishle, Tabahi Bashichin, Kiane Dashiche, Honagane Dashinala, Jessica Antonio Yinshe. I'm a member of the Navajo Nation, and my name is Jessica Antonio. I'm a student at Arizona State University. I just recently graduated back in May 2020, and I graduated with 3 degrees. So my degrees were Business Administration, American Indian Studies, and Nutrition Dietetics. We also have student government here as well. Did you guys want to introduce yourself as well?
Hi, my name is Bridget Saidu. I'm currently going to be a junior with Barrett, and I am a Justice Studies and Philosophy major, and I am a senator for the college.
Hi, my name is Yamala Ibanez. I am a senator for the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College, and I am currently an undergrad in my junior year studying secondary education and political science.
Hi, my name is Alexia Isais. I'm a senator for the college, and I'm currently in my junior year studying political science and history.
Thank you. Okay, going back to the agenda. Let's see.
Somebody has their hand raised in the...
Yeah, okay. Let's Berlin.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. My name is Beryl. I'm an international student with a F1 visa holder. I'm a dietetic student and also dietetic intern of Arizona State University. Thank you.
Is there any attendees that want to introduce themselves as well?
Hello, my name is Emily Medina, and I am a first-year undergrad student and printmaking major at the Herberger Institute for Design and the Arts.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashley Claw. I am an undergrad student going into my senior year, majoring in the science of healthcare delivery with a concurrent degree in American Indian Studies. This upcoming school year, I will be the facilitator of assembly for the Alliance of Indigenous Peoples, as well as facilitator of communication and documentation for Indigenous Wellness Alliance. Thank you.
Is there any other attendees that want to introduce themselves? Any other students at ASU?
Hello, Yate. My name is Savannah Nelson. I am this year's Miss Indian ASU first attendant, and I am also a facilitator of funding. Facilitator of funding for the Native Wellness Alliance also on the downtown campus. And I've been involved with AIP, the Alliance of Indigenous Peoples, as well as a facilitator, different facilitators over the years, but yeah. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Hello?
We can hear you, Napoleon.
Yes, we can
All
hear
right. Skiktosh, Anina Chuki Kapoli Marietta. My name is Napoleon. I'm a grad student here at ASU, I think, still. I'm in the Indigenous Rights and Social Justice track in the American Indian Studies. I got my undergrad in Justice Studies too, Justice Studies and American Indian Studies, and then I work for American Indian Student Support Services as a graduate assistant there, and I'm also part of the American Indian Graduate Student Association as the graduate liaison or graduate facilitator as well.
Thank you. If there's anybody else that would like to speak, you have time throughout the meeting. We're going to go ahead and continue going forward with our agenda. And so Bridget will be able to keep an eye on that. So let's go ahead and share. So the mission, basically the reason why the students are here to talk to ASU administration is because it started with the CARES Act back in March 2020. The CARES Act would give the stimulus check. Most people know it the Stimulus Check Act because it gave everybody $1,200. Written in that act, a lot of the senators and House representatives, as well as the United States Department of Education, felt that it was much needed to also include people that won't get the stimulus check from the taxes, which happen to be high school students as well as college students. Because the tax information states that if you're qualified to be a dependent on your parents' tax return and you're over the age of 18, you do not qualify to receive any funding from the Stimulus Act. So that's why they put the Education Act in there. And so the education portion of the CARES Act, again, the CARES Act stands for Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. So after that bill was enacted back in March 2020, the United States Department of Education gave out funding throughout the whole nation, throughout all the colleges within the United States, amount of funding to help their students that were going through that, where their education was affected by the coronavirus pandemic. And so that was to help the students. And so I believe, can you guys see my page? Okay. And so this came from the Secretary of Education, and it was announced towards the presidents of each university and college throughout the nation back in April 2020. And so I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. You guys can pretty much read it yourselves. If you want to, you can find it. But basically what it says, I'll read the first paragraph and we'll go from there. These are unpredictable, unprecedented and challenging times for your students and for you. I know you find yourself grappling with issues and you never imagined, and I want to assure you that we are here to support you in your mission and to quickly provide the resources and flexibility you need to continue educating your students. That is why we're focusing on implementing the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, Economic Security Act quickly and faithfully. So throughout this letter, it's giving little bits of information on how the presidents of each university and each institution should handle this CARES Act funding. So with all the colleges and universities throughout the whole nation, Arizona State University received the most funding from all colleges throughout the United States. They received $63.5 million. And at least half of that, which states here, at least 50% must be reserved to provide students with emergency financial aid grants to help cover expenses related to the disruption of campus operations due to the coronavirus. So this is an important statement for me, just because it's supposed to help students. Also, it also states that it's supposed to help students that were affected by coronavirus. And I remember a comment that was stated back in Wednesday by one of the ASU administrations. And he stated, President Crow stated that the CARES Act funding is used as intended, and it's supposed to be used to help students continue education. And I believe, yes, it's supposed to help students continue education because their education was affected by this. But that's not the whole purpose of the CARES Act. The CARES Act doesn't say anything about college or continuing or finishing up their education. The CARES Act says Coronavirus Aid, Relief, Economic Security Act. These students in spring 2020 were affected by coronavirus. They had short-term notice, they had to think fast, they had to be very resourceful, and they had to do it by themselves because ASU did not offer any support, little to no support from the administration or ASU staff. All I got during that time was do the best you can. And so that funding, yes, it's supposed to help students continue their education, but that's not the whole goal. That's Crow's personal goal. The coronavirus is supposed to help students that were affected by the coronavirus. And the spring 2020 students were affected. They were the first students that had to think on their feet in the middle of their semester and adapt with short-term notice and little support from ASU. So basically this letter said that the most that the student can get from, like, per capita, each student can get from the CARES Act, the maximum amount is $6,195. That's the maximum Pell Grant for the academic year. So each student, the maximum amount they can get from this CARES Act funding is $6,195 each. And since ASU is the #1 university throughout the whole United States, the #1 college that got the most funding, why are their students the last to get the funding? Why are their students the last to be thought of or even ignored and pushed aside. So we did reach out to President Crow. President Crow did not give us an answer to his letter, the letter we wrote to him, stating we are not happy with how ASU is handling the funds. We had to read from a newspaper article from Arizona Central back in March 22nd or May 22nd that stated President Crow said that the CARES Act funding, the $31.8 million allocated to students, will not be given to students, ASU students of spring 2020 semester. It will be given to students the summer of 2020, the fall of 2020, which I feel, and like everyone else that's here at this meeting, feels that it's very frustrating and disappointing with their university's decision. So that's why we are here. The title of our meeting, if I can pull it up. So the title of our meeting share. Okay. So the title of our meeting is ASU students voice their concerns to administration on withholding the CARES Act funding. So they will not be giving, they stated that giving spring 2020 students, the students that were the first ones to be affected by COVID-19, the students that are still in the state of emergency due to COVID-19 and are financially struggling still after spring 2020 is over. And so we are asking Arizona State University for emergency support from the 31.8 million CARES Act to be dispersed immediately. The students enrolled in spring had their personal lives and educational life. So that's our mission here. We're going to now give ASU admission time to speak on Arizona State University's behalf on anything you guys would like to state.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. Would you mind pulling back up that CARES Act sheet that you had? I think it had some important information that will be helpful for explaining how ASU is addressing the CARES Act.
Okay, I'm sorry, my connection got foggy.
Okay.
So,
and as it comes up, I can speak to some of what you'll see there. So one of the lines that came after what Jessica was reading, or right before, somewhere in proximity, is that there's significant discretion into how the CARES Act money, how the decisions are made around how it's allocated. And with a strong preference, which you can see there, is allocating those monies to those with significant need. And so Jessica, you highlighted the part as well about some of the idea of a threshold of funding, and they were using the Pell Grant as guidance in that particular instance. So indeed, some of you may be familiar with colleagues around the nation where the choice is in that letter, once it pops up, to give out equal amounts of checks out to students and distribute at whatever time all at once, and that what would be more of an equal distribution. ASU has considered going in the direction of, and has committed to going in the direction of, equitable distribution. So looking at need. The thinking behind why there was no money given in the spring is because students were already fully packaged in their financial aid. So for those who had aid or need, that was already accounted for in the spring semester. If students found themselves in a situation of emergency or crisis, then there were funding sources available. And so I know Dean Aska may want to speak to what her office does, and the different deans of students across all our locations is we have access to student crisis fund money. So when students presented themselves, or we heard about students, they might have written into the president, similar to how Jessica, the letter went forward to the president's office. Those were then distributed back to either the dean's office or to the colleges who could help with emergency or crisis funding. And I know, Jessica, you and I talked earlier in the week about, I looked at some of those figures. There was a combination of several $100,000 that went out from the Deans of Students Crisis and Emergency Fund. There were also fast approaching $1 million of different monies that went out from the colleges to students who presented with need. And so that's how we bridged that gap for the spring semester, and then all of the CARES Act money, which has yet to be finalized and how it will be distributed. And so you saw that in the letter as well, that once that is finalized, then the monies will be released and can be used to support our fall semester students. So the other piece to probably emphasize here is students where the economic situation was changing in a more permanent way, they also were eligible for a reevaluation with financial aid. So that occurred for students in the 1920 school year. That also has been occurring, and you can imagine the queue at this point, or the buildup of people who are asking for a reevaluation, is fairly long. And so many families and many students have submitted additional documentation to have their financial aid looked at going into the 2020-21 semester as well. So there's a brief overview of our thinking and of the decisions.
Daniel Lopez, one of the attendees, had something to say, so I'm going to give him speaking rights.
Hi, my name is Daniel Lopez. I'm a senator with USG also. I believe I've talked to Dean Aska before. I don't know if I've ever talked to you, Dean Vogel, but I was wondering specifically, you mentioned like an equitable distribution, which I'm glad ASU is going that route. It makes a lot more sense than just universal distribution, given the size of the school. But I was wondering that given the higher education relief funds were intended to provide, emergency relief, obviously, do you think that it is equitable to exclude students in the spring and summer semesters who have since graduated or maybe even had to drop out because of their financial situation? Because as far as I'm aware, the routes that made COVID emergency funds available directly from the school, those were not like widely advertised, and nor am I aware were our students privately contacted. Let's say, for example, a student drops out. I'm not aware of any initiative to reach out and contact that person and allocate them financial aid unless they themselves took the initiative to find some.
Yeah, so there are campaigns to reach out to students who don't enroll. So my ask of anyone on the Zoom, or if anyone listening out there, is if you have students that have altered their educational attainment because of what's going on, then you need to send me their name or have them make themselves known to us.
Yeah, but I guess my question is why is the burden of making themselves known fall onto the students individually rather than on the school that is choosing to delay the distribution of the funding?
Yeah, so we also monitor it. So it's not only the burden on the student, but we want to see our graduation rates and our educational attainment rates go up. So the colleges do calling campaigns. They are checking on people who complete. So it actually goes both ways.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I would like to add on to what Daniel said, something very important. And we also discussed this over the phone, Joanne, was that the funding that you are talking about, the COVID coronavirus crisis or COVID relief fund or whatever fund each colleges or student support services offered to students, was not part of the CARES Act funding. Those fundings were either offered by the student government, their own personal funding, or by the college's personal funding, or by private donors that donated to student services like American Indian Studies, so students would be able to have the COVID relief fund. Those advertisements, they were not well advertised out there. I mean, you guys run ASU, your Arizona State University admission, you guys made our emails. You gave us emails and letters that announced ASU is converting online. You guys could have set a mass one stating, here's all the funding you guys can take advantage of. We know you guys are hurting. But that was not an email that was sent to me. And that makes me disappointed because you guys said in the article, President Crow says he took care of all spring 2020 students. And then if any student needs any help, resources will be found if they just raise their hand. We are here because students are raising their hand. Students feel left out, and we will go over that later. That's on the agenda. But the funding, you guys say that you guys helped so many students, and the funding that you said 1.2 million ASU collectively gave to students during COVID-19 obviously was not enough, and obviously did not take care of every student during spring 2020 semester, like you guys say in your newspapers, and like you guys say and you announce at these meetings. So either you're not talking to students or you're ignoring them or what they're saying. So I'm here to tell you that that 1.2 million didn't come from Arizona administration, didn't come from ASU's private COVID grant. It came from student government. It came from private donors, American Indian Studies Department. It came from colleges like the law student and the art student to help their students to get through the COVID. That wasn't ASU. ASU doesn't get to take credit for that. ASU has the CARES Act, and they have an obligation to help their students. And then Daniel Lopez was right. He said that funding was not advertised, because if it was advertised, we would not be here. If it helped every student during spring semester, we would not be here. So that's what I would like to say.
Thank you. And I have the list of those who are on the call. And so if you want to somehow note to me that you need to be taken care of or want your situation reevaluated, let us know that. But it is not, you're right, it's not CARES Act funding we're talking about. These are, and some of these funds the colleges put together with all various sort of fundraising efforts that they had. And so you're right, these came from many different sources. And they weren't all available at the beginning, but they became available throughout the course of the spring semester. Our crisis fund has existed for some time though.
There is a long list of people who want to speak, so I'm going to start giving them speaking rights. First, it's going to be Beryl Heiser.
Oh, hi, my name is Beryl. I was going to change my visa before COVID-19, but due to this situation, I cannot do that anymore. It's not a case, so I have to remain a student in order to complete my dietetic internship. And I have been talking to scholarship services and whoever I found to seek help for like months, but there is no additional fund for international students. Why we are not included in those additional funds? I mean, I did even send an email to the Dean of the College of Health Solutions months ago, and I haven't received an email yet. Arizona State University known as welcoming a lot of international students in world, like nationwide, yet I don't feel like I was welcome at all. So thank you, that was it. But that was my question, actually, why we were not included in those funds.
Thank you, Carol. And were you talking specifically about CARES Act? Because you are correct, the CARES Act funding that will be coming out does not include international students.
They are not CARES Act? It's not going to be?
Correct.
That is correct. CARES Act does not fund online students, does not fund undocumented students, does not fund international students, and does not fund DICA students.
Well, then who's going to fund us? That we are here, we pay like 3 times more tuition than an Arizona resident, and we also need help. Who's going to help us?
And Beryl, I took your name down and I'm sad to hear you did not get a response back from your college. Is it okay if I email the dean to let the dean know that?
Sure, of course.
Thank you.
Beryl, I'm also aware that there's a student, I don't know if you're still on the call, but I also know that there's a student that's actually has started a lawsuit with Arizona State University regarding tuition refund.
Mm-hmm.
You might want to talk to him as well. And there's also a lawsuit starting with Arizona Region's regarding housing. I don't know if that's still a case, but I read an article about NAU students, ASU students, and U of A students suing the universities due to they were no longer living in the dorms and they did not have financial resources, and they wanted to get their housing reimbursed or refunded back to them. So I'm aware of those two that you might be included in, but the CARES Act funding, I'm sorry, we just found out just recently this week too that it doesn't qualify for undocumented students, DICA students, international students, and online students. So a lot of the students are online within ASU that aren't going to get part of this funding as well.
Okay, I understand. If you can send me the information of that person, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll send that.
Thank you.
Jessica, if I could just add to that, that's the federal government guideline. That's not isolated to an ASU guideline. And so for those students who were not included in the CARES Act, that is where the Dean of Students office and the colleges are also working to support students who may not receive funding from the CARES Act. But I just want to share with folks that that guidance is not the institution's guidance. That's federal guidance.
What are you talking about?
So the way you just communicated accurately that online student, international students, and DACA students are not eligible for the CARES Act, that guideline is a federal guideline. It's not an ASU guideline.
Oh yeah,
So
I'm completely aware. I read what was it? The National Conference of State Legislation. We were talking about that. So that was definitely a federal guideline, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
But Beryl, you might also want to look at wherever country that you came from as an international student and see if they have anything that they're funding economic.
The next student that's going to speak is Brock. So Brock, if you want to go ahead.
Hi there. So hi, I'm Brock Damel. I'm going to be a sophomore this fall on the Tempe campus. So I guess, what I'm struggling to understand is, how, we can include the most viable stakeholders, students, in this process of distributing these funds and determining how they're going to be distributed. I mean, it's in our mission, that we're measured by not whom we exclude, but by whom we include. So I'm just wondering if there's any way that students or representatives of students can be made a formal part of this process in determining how these funds are going to be allocated. I just think that's really important that the students, the main stakeholders here, are included in that discussion.
Brock, I think this group is doing that right now. I will certainly take your feedback back to the group that I know is working on it. And ensure that they hear what you are asking for tonight.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, the next student that wanted to speak, Daniel, had their hand up again. So,
Oh yeah, hi. I just thought it would be important to note for everyone here that through the CARES Act and the Higher Education Relief Funds, ASU is able to be reimbursed for all of the money they spend privately. This probably doesn't include anything they collect from private donations, for example, to the colleges. But for example, the Dean of Students office through the CARES Act, whenever they do receive that $64 million, will be able to be reimbursed for their distributions. And so the only exception to that would be if they gave distributions out to international students, online students, DACA students, et cetera, right? Because the CARES Act does exclude those groups. And so I just don't want anyone going into this to believe necessarily that ASU is using their own money for a lot of these distributions. This is money that they will be reimbursed for in the future.
Thanks, Daniel. We hope so, but here's the problem that we're encountering is the debts and the losses that we have suffered through COVID greatly outweigh that $63.5 million. So I like where your thinking's at, Daniel. I hope that the Dean's office and some of our funds would be the ones to be reimbursed. I see Dean Aska smiling. I have a feeling though that it probably won't be the case, that it will go to other things that benefit students either directly or indirectly, and it may not mean reimbursing us. So it's because the losses are so great that it may or may not come back to us, and likely not.
Oh, yes, of course. I was speaking as ASU as an administration in general, not your specific office necessarily.
Okay, no, but I like that you were thinking of us. We would love that.
If I could add something really quick, I know this isn't something that's particularly on the shoulders of the dean of the office of the deans, but I do want to add that it shouldn't, the fault of the university for, falling into debt, it shouldn't be on the students' shoulders. That should be something that the university handles. And we shouldn't be the ones to suffer because of that. We all pay tuition. We all, contribute towards the fees and stuff like that. So, you did mention that there was debts, and because of that, the office might not get reimbursed. But I feel like that is more of an issue that falls on the shoulders of ASU's financial decisions and not necessarily the students' decisions. But that's all I wanted to add.
Appreciate that.
Hi, my name is Emily, and I'd like to. I raised my hand a while ago to tag on to the conversation in which we were talking about how these sort of grants weren't widely advertised to all students. I was completely unaware until I'd say a couple meetings ago um, with these other students to hear about uh, extra money that we could have applied for in emergency states. Um, I'd also like to say that like applying for these things and having to, detail specifically what kind of money we've spent because of COVID, it can add an extra stress to the application process. And I believe we can all agree that COVID-19 is stressful state already. And I could see that, the added stress of filing for an application and then maybe not getting as much funds as you'd like or not getting any at all, that would be stressful in itself. So if the college were to, automatically allocate, I have friends from other colleges who have said that their colleges, estimate how much they would qualify for based off of their leftover meal plan, based off of their Pell grants, automatically, and sent them a check. I know that would be a lot easier than having to look for and fight for money yourself. I just felt like that was important to add to the conversation for a better understanding about applying for this money.
Thanks, Emily. And Dean Aska could probably speak to the process, which at least from the Dean of Students office is a minimal burden. It's really a very quick process. I'm not certain how the other colleges did it. And your point is well taken, is that it may have been easier to do things other than the direction we are choosing to go. But it is the commitment we have made was not to go in the direction of that sort of quick distribution of checks. And I've heard the criticism from, and you all may know some people who at other institutions where their families or their personal situation was actually quite okay. Not to say they didn't appreciate the money, but they didn't necessarily need that money. And so we're really focusing on the need piece of this.
Hi, my name is Janek Quiroga. So I had a question because, well, Wednesday I was on the meeting and I heard, students explaining their situation. I didn't explain mine. And it got me thinking, like, why should anybody, like the students, explain that they need it? And my question is, are y'all gonna make summer and fall students have to explain why they need the money? Because I mean, if that's what you want, if you want all these students to get together and tell you why I apologize, 3-year-old, sorry, yeah, that's what I had to go through whenever we had to switch to online. Sorry about that. So my question, like, I mean, I believe if you're gonna make us have to explain to like possibly change your mind as to why we should be reimbursed, then maybe we should get summer and fall students to do that as well. it sounds fair. I mean, I know you're not going to do that. That's a lot of, you're going to get a lot of letters.
So I think there's a combination approach here, which is we're identifying people who, based upon either resubmitting some documentation for some of those who are reevaluated, or for students who are being packaged for their fall semesters, is noticing those that have and being able to, without having people have to, which I think is what I'm catching from your comment, justify why they need it. There will be some people who step forward, and I have fielded, and maybe Dean Aska has as well, many of those emails where we continue to drive people. If you have a concern, email the president. If you have a concern, email the deans of students, which is usually our preference because it gets to us when it's something like a student need anyway. And then we can get that to financial aid and scholarship services. And then they can use that in the calculation without having to prove it. I think that's the part I makes my heart ache a little bit. And what you're talking about is there will be some who have been asked to follow up with some documentation. That's very common in the financial aid space. That's why people that are not international students or some of our other populations we were talking about, is there is some indication in the FAFSA of an economic profile with some of these families, but when it has changed, or for students, then they are resubmitting some paperwork and documentation. But we're trying to identify that ahead of time and not having to have people justify.
So I'm sorry, but can you explain how exactly you're gonna base summer and fall students in receiving the money? Sorry, I get so nervous when I'm on the spot. Can't even talk. So what are you basing that on? The summer and the fall students?
Yes, and I'm not a financial aid person, so this is where, and Dean Aska is not either, and so this is where we might get we'll get close, but know that there are people who do this day in and day out. But what they do is, this is the time of the year that they are packaging students. Now, they already did the ones for summer because we've already started summer. They may still be working out some of the summer B students. They did do a retroactive look at some of the students for 1920. I think I mentioned that at the beginning, who needed adjustment in their financial aid packages because of COVID. So that did happen. And then they are packaging the students going forward. So that's an automatic process that happens in financial aid and scholarship services to get any of your financial, whether it's scholarships or loans or grants. And I think that's the thing that happens sometimes too, is that there can be discontent about, well, wait, I wanted it as a grant. I could have told you I wanted that as a college student too, because there were combinations of grants and loans, and then there's debt. But the financial aid does a great job of looking through and trying to make the right combination for students based upon their economic need, their financial need.
I had a quick question. Sorry, Napoleon, you'll be next. But can you actually put that information in the chat box where they can locate that 1920 fund, as well as the CARES Act fund and the COVID relief funds from each colleges? So that these students, whatever college they fall under, at least they can start applying to some of those resources. Student government was kind enough to give us their information, but some of their stuff has closed.
I think, is that the ones with the colleges? I don't necessarily have their information, but I know Dean Aska could put the Dean of Students one up. Yeah, we sent an email to all the deans. They got the same email President Crow did. We got no response from them. So if you can get us that information, either send it to us through an email, or you can put it in the chat box. And I think I bet all their 2019, 2020 has closed potentially. They may be doing some summer grants, but I would very much doubt that anyone is going back to spring 2020 at this point. Just so that we're clear about that.
Okay. So we can get back on the CARES Act. Napoleon, I think you're up next.
All right. So, President Crow has this this separate statement to, recognizing the territories and the lands that these universities stand on, right? And ironically, I have to pay to stay on my own territory. Because I am Akabaratam and Pipash that he recognizes. And we can get into all of that later and what that actually means. But for me, it's the housing. And I know housing gets a lot of a lot of calls because I used to work for ASU at the help center, and we would get anything but those calls. And so if you're an American Indian student, Indigenous student who is already going here, we're always having to fill something out. We're always having to resubmit it. The office isn't open, you know, financial aid. Their office is not working with, you know, we only have one person who works for tribal scholarships. So we're always, we know, like me, I know everything about having to submit an application and having the documents. We're drowned in it constantly. So for me, when I found out that we were going online and got the email about this credit, um, you know, this $1,500 credit, it didn't make any financial sense to me because I was calculating how much I already pay and what the next damage is going to look next semester. So, you know, when I got that, it was kind of a slap in the face because rather than them offering all of us to just have our fully amounted refund for our housing, you know, we were just offered this credit. And, you know, my roommates are just like, yeah, dude, I'm just going to have to take it and just leave because I'm not even from here, you know? And so for me, I had to at least submit like 3 requirements. It was like, if you work at a job at ASU or if you have a, a reason why you can't go home. And there was another one, but I can't remember which one it was. So when I contacted the housing department, I submitted because I thought I could apply for all of those because I thought I do fit in a lot of these categories. And when I got back was just like, you know, oh, this is only for international students if you can't explain why you can't go back home. And it didn't even specify that in their housing application. It just said due to COVID, just explain, you know, anything that would hinders you from going back. And in a lot of tribal nations, they're closing off their reservations in order you can't come back. So when I applied, I put that specifically in there for a lot of tribal folks that can't go back to their communities because of their high. As you can see in the news, that there's a lot of tribal nations getting hit largely, and at the time when I submitted mine, it was about at the peak of it. So I was trying to tell people or tell the folks, you know, in the housing department that, well, I thought I fit into that because I can go home. And they said, no, it's just for international students. And then I applied for another one. And they said, you don't require for that either. So I had to beg my my employer to submit, you know, a document that I'm working for the summer. And that was my last resort because I literally had nowhere else to go, right? And as far as bad as it is, you know, having to come all the way back to live with my mom and all that stuff, that's pretty far. Even not even trying to come back to ASU for the next semester that's promised to have all this money and stuff like that. So for me, the housing portion of it, I don't know if it does might fall on your shoulders, but or not. But I think it's really crucial that folks who were, because I know other people who had to fly or drive back to their travel nation and had to do all of that the footwork. But you know, I get a lot of funding, you know, for half of mine, and then ASU takes the rest of it, and so I really didn't have any other way. And even also to be in debt as well as for last semester's housing. And because this is out of our reach, like it just was not handled very well. And the person that is the director of my housing facility kind of just was rude about it. Because I thought it was unprofessional how much lack of communication has been going on. And I needed to know whether to move out before the date because it was a very small window, and it just really didn't make any sense to me, and it did kind of feel I was really disrespected in a way that, you know, we have to pay all this, and then yet, you know, here's all this big old statements about living on indigenous land and recognizing it, but I'm here I am getting slapped in the face and, not being heard, you know what I mean? As a person of this territory, and it's just like, what the heck? But I just wanted to just point that out as far as like the housing situation happened for me.
Napoleon, where did you live? I can certainly follow up and
I'm
see.
still here actually because I had to. I had to. So that's what I said. I had to beg them to finally.
I'm glad that you did. It sounds like you needed to stay, so I'm glad that you were able to stay.
Yeah. So when I got that, and then they finally let me know you're just gonna stay in your same dorm. But
his statement was that he shouldn't have to have begged to stay in housing. He shouldn't have had to fight to stay in the dorm at ASU. They should have took his word that he needed to stay at ASU. So basically ASU tried to push every student, as many students as they could, out of the dorm, giving them the idea that they would get cash refund of $1,500. And then it comes out a month later that was, how do you say it, Joanne? Non-refundable credit.
Non-refundable.
And you guys didn't state that in layman's terms to these people that had to leave the dorms, that meant that money, the $1,500, was going to be credited to their ASU account to cover any ASU bills in the foreseeable future relating to tuition, books, housing. But it wasn't paid out direct deposit to these students who gave up their roof and hoping to get $1,500 for them to establish a new roof over their heads.
Nope, and Napoleon hopped off, but I'm happy to follow up. And
Sorry about that. There's just more people that need to speak.
And he may need, if he wants to chat, I'll read the chat. So
yeah, I can always let him speak again if he wants to raise his hand. But right now we're gonna let Savannah go ahead.
Hey, Savannah, good to see you.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. All right, hi everyone. I really wanted to hop in after those statements, especially speaking on behalf of the Indigenous students at ASU. It's just my duty as an ambassador, and this is really, it's a really serious thing, and I think that ASU has definitely dropped the ball on providing this essential financial need that, we as Indigenous students, we shouldn't even have to ask for this. We shouldn't even have to beg, especially those, like what Napoleon is saying, he's Autumn. This is his land. And again, like all the statements, all the acknowledgement, the plaque in the student pavilion, like all these things acknowledging the land that ASU stands on at a time that we're really in need out of everyone. Specifically 2 tribal nations. Now it's White Mountain Apache that has the highest incident rate of COVID. And behind that is Navajo, my community. It's really crazy to think how ASU has handled this and not honored the commitment that Michael Crow has to us as the community originally here before ASU, before any of this. History is repeating itself, and especially with the whole Black Lives Matter movement and people of color finally getting a spotlight in the public. I hope that is there any change that's going to be happening to this CARES Act? Is there anything specifically helping us for once? Because we are the ones that are disproportionately affected by COVID-19, not even just Indigenous students, and as a public institution, the largest public institution in the nation, I find it really hard to understand why it's so hard to get this funding that we need to continue our schooling, to go back to our home communities, to help and, make them better. And that's just really what's been on my mind. And ASU, you need to step up. We need to see some action being taken and better serving our communities, just acknowledging our communities, saying you're on our land, saying you respect us is okay, that's something, but that's not enough. You need to go further than that, and we need to see it now. And that's all I had to say right now, I think.
Thank you, Savannah. And thanks to Napoleon too for pointing out you shouldn't have had to feel you needed to justify a need to stay. And so I will certainly look into that with housing. And then some of you may be familiar, but I'd certainly share. And then those of you who are involved in student government will likely hear more about this in the weeks to come. But I hope it is good news that ASU's biodesign testing has now reached out to many of the tribal nations. They, I know, have been for weeks out on the Navajo Nation, working with the Navajo Housing Authority. We, in the last week, were talking to some council members with White Mountain Apache. Colorado River Tribe, I think, has been added to the list. And so many of our Arizona, and actually crossing over specifically when we're speaking Navajo, into New Mexico and maybe Utah. I can't remember if they set up a site there, but we have been working with and testing and making sure we can get samples tested through the biodesign lab to identify cases of COVID. So I didn't know if anyone on the call or on the Zoom knew that was occurring, but I know we have been partnering, ASU has, to try to get critical resources there.
What has ASU done for students during the whole COVID with the CARES Act funding?
Yeah, and I think you're about to see what we will do with CARES Act funding. So my understanding from the group that has been working on it is that in the next week to 2 weeks, that the plan should be fully formed. And once that goes and is turned in, then the money is released to be distributed. So I'm hoping that they're on the time frame I'm hearing, which is that CARES Act funding plans would be finalized in the next week to 2 weeks.
Will that include spring 2020 students?
No, that is not currently part of the plan, but I will take your feedback from tonight to that group so they can hear that you are asking that it be included.
Yes,
the
that's
next
the
person on
meeting.
the speakers list. I'm sorry, I'm going to add her really quickly and then you can start speaking again. It's going to be Jeanette, but anyone can go.
Hi, okay, so I have one more question. Do online courses and in-person courses vary for price? For tuition and all that? Like, do online and in-person classes, does the price vary?
It does. So immersion students and online students do pay different tuition structures. The difference, and there's a great video that will be going out this week to describe our different modalities of learning. And so what we did in the spring with full immersion going to digital immersion is actually this more interactive experience that you're seeing via Zoom. And so we don't consider this platform to be online, that this is a synchronous interactive platform, which I think you'll see will have great enhancements going into the fall. There's a huge investment going into the classrooms to make them even more interactive. So I get the point. I think that is something that students have been arguing about, you know, online pays this, immersion's paying that, and shouldn't we see some type of change to the tuition structure? And certainly we understand the point, but at the same time, we realize that this that you're experiencing right now is different from what is typically seen in an online platform, which is take at your own pace, on your own time, and maybe with a different type of interaction with faculty.
I'm sorry, can you please close the door, baby? Thank you. Okay, thank you.
I think Bailey wanted to speak, so you can go ahead and then
I think
Daniel.
Did you give an amount to how much the online tuition and the student in-person tuition, what the amounts were? Because I think that was part of her question.
I did not, and I don't have those with me. So I'd have to look them up. And they're different based upon your programs too. So there's great variability depending upon what program.
Sorry, Bridget, you can go ahead.
Well, I was just saying that Bailey wanted to speak. So.
Okay, so as we all know, I'm from South Dakota and I drove all the way down to Arizona and I was staying at the Polytechnic campus in Mesa in a house. And I get the first email March 16th saying that we're going to be proceeding due to coronavirus for 2 weeks online. And then a few days later, I get that they're extending it to the rest of the semester online. But the part that really upsets me is that I could have moved home a long time ago in March prior to spring break. And this $1,500 credit that's supposed to be for next fall, that could have helped me move home. I could have been home a long time ago. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask really quickly, if ASU decides that because of the COVID situation, presuming it's going to be worse because of the country we live in, if in Arizona that COVID is too bad to be able to move back to campus and classes have to be fully online, or will ASU be offering reduced tuition?
So we have not decided what the fall will look like yet. It is as we have shared, which is we are hoping for on campus and in-person delivery of classes. So nothing yet to comment about there because we haven't thought about that potential inevitability of if we needed to change modality. We're staying optimistic at this point.
Yeah, but all the information you've put out so far suggests that you're prepared for every situation. I would assume that also means a tuition schedule, right? Because the alternative is saying that, well, what'll happen is in about a month or two here, tuition fund fees are going to hit students' bank accounts, and then they're going to discover in 2 weeks later that all the classes are online, right? So, I mean, you have to at least consider the possibility of the fact that we're going to be on all online school. The curve isn't really flattening; it's kind of going up, actually. So, I mean, I understand being optimistic, but I mean, are you telling me that you actually not even looked into or even thought about what campus is like, these costs are going to look like, or campus is going to look like if it's all online?
I have not been part of those conversations yet.
You should definitely bring it up.
Do you know who has been?
There are lots of groups who are working on the financial modeling if we need to, but I don't have any further information on that at this point. We could reconvene in a few weeks and I can see if I can learn some more.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I second that. I agree that definitely should be something to consider, because Arizona is one of the ones mentioned in national news. There's Texas, there's Florida, and Arizona. So definitely something to start thinking about. You have like 30 to a month and a half. So, and a lot of students don't want to be in the same boat where we're paying in-person tuition when we're not getting in-person experience.
We will have students, I think you all know this, in person, based upon some of the conversation we were having. There will be students who need to live with us. And so it's quite likely to be the case that we will be operating as we did even in the spring. And then if you aren't aware, it's probably important for this group to share in your networks that if people are concerned about coming back, we want you to take classes where you feel comfortable and confident. And so if you need to use what we're calling ASU Sync, which is this interactive Zoom platform that we're using right now, students can make that choice to stay. And so to Bailey's point, if you want to be in South Dakota, for instance, and maybe you're there now, is you can make that choice ahead of the fall to be where you feel most comfortable.
So I also had a hard time obtaining materials too, because I was still staying in the metropolitan area. I moved in with family in the valley. I had to go to the library to get my materials. I didn't feel safe going to Tempe to getting my materials. I could have had things mailed to South Dakota here. I could have moved back here and I could have finished things. I could have had my materials mailed to me. I didn't have to risk my life going all the way to Tempe to get it. So yes, it's to my discretion.
I hope you see, Joanne, how upset students are. We've really been hearing a lot from you, and I feel like students need to have that opportunity to speak. So let's hear from more students if possible, please.
That'd be great.
Hi, I was just recently unmuted. I would let Jessica speak first, but since we're talking about the differences between spring 2020 and fall 2020 to even summer 2020 students, I think we need to discuss and point out very importantly that the spring 2020 students had to be quick on their feet. They had to adjust to unexpected factors. we were the ones that had to, I think, suffer the most because of this, versus the fall semesters coming up. They already understand what they're going to be in for. They already understand what their money is going towards, whether it be fully online school, or online and sync in the way you said it earlier, or the specific students that still need in-person classes. Like I know that art students and certain like biology students are going to be able to have in-person classes, but me as an art student for spring 2020, I was not able to have this. And so I do believe that my art studies could have definitely been a lot better if classes were to have stayed in person, but they weren't. And so I think that is one of my definite concerns. There is the quality of education that I received in spring 2020, focusing on buying new materials to work at home, focused on lack of interaction with other students. As art students, it may seem like it's individualistic work, but when we're learning, it's highly group orientated, as well as just general classes as well, just having to fight the difference from going to in person to online so quickly, and especially considering the way ASU lacked in communication with us. I was living on campus and I found things out via the news, via, my family and friends sharing things with me on Facebook or on social media before I heard it from ASU, which was quite a shock. And it was hard for me to believe certain things when it came from social media before it came to me from my college.
That's actually a good segue to what I was going to ask or talk about, because so I'm a student worker at the American Indian Student Support Services, and if when we had to transfer online, our building is in Discovery Hall, and I know students who would different ranges um, of ages and technological savvy folks and non-technological savvy folks, so we had to help them out. And those folks, like, even because of we had to close um our services, we offered services like printing and computer lab and all that stuff, and building that community. And then now if we're also going to be online, like my job also is going to be impacted about that, because like I work with grad students, and like you can see there's like 2 here. Sorry if I missed anyone else, but we also offer a lot of things for them as well that we were looking to envision in the future. And those are in the works. But if we're also going to be online, or if we're not taking in these procedures, and I think I can speak for the rest of the other student workers that work with me and on various different campuses, how are we going to still be able to be financially stable as well, without having our department being cut, because we have to let students go off the student worker position because of these types of things in our department, when we cater to so many students as well, that don't have that type of like computers or printing or books and stuff like that. So that's another thing that I was just kind of worried about, as far as like, as a student worker being employed for one, and then also our services that we do give to these students, because I was a part of that, calling students and making sure a lot of our native students were okay wherever they came from, wherever they had to go back, and that was a huge list. And so all of that also was a part of our mission to make sure our students are okay. So as just a department as a whole, and as a student worker, and then how we're going to transfer all of that, that's just another thing, that a critical thing to also to bring up, because like the person said before me, you know, it's about being in person and having those things. You know, art students, I know tons of art students who needed that facility and needed other things as well, just because there's so many dynamics. And when art and also folks who are doing like silversmithing and stuff and all these other different things, and then for us is our resources. So that's just my thing is, what is American Indian Student Support Services going to look like if we're not all there? If we're not going to be able to be there for our people and offering those resources. So thanks, the Hoge.
I'd like to yield my time to Eric as he wanted to speak 20 minutes ago.
Thank you for allowing me to speak, Ms. Ibanez. So first of all, just to piggyback off of most of the students' concerns, I am part of the Spring 2020, the student of Spring 2020. Unfortunately, ASU, I'm not in their plan to be part of receiving funding from the CARES Act. When we transitioned to online, I had to purchase a printer, toner, and paper as well. And so that's costly. Also, my tribal nation closed its borders to non-res. So I was not able to go back home. And also having to pay rent during this summer. So rent here is pretty pricey, of course, and I'll just put it out there. It's $800 a month. And then I received calls from the American Indian Graduate Center. Eric, how are you doing? I received calls from ASU AISSS. Eric, are you okay? I received calls from my tribe, but I never received a call from ASU Student Services, but they did collect my money for tuition. So am I just a number, or am I actually a student that ASU is worried about? My first question I'm gonna ask though is, ASU, is the CARES Act, our students that are online students, DACA, undocumented, and international students gonna qualify for the 2020 spring if you guys decide to provide funding from the CARES Act to us? And will we also be part of fall 2020? Undocumented, DACA, online students, and international students should not be left out as well. So that's my question. I would like to, for you to take back, Joanne Vogel, to whoever you speak with, to put us on that plan, because we're all paying tuition to ASU. And at the end of the day, our goal is to earn a degree from ASU. And so if we're gonna represent ASU, then we also need ASU to step up and represent us as well. If you're gonna use our numbers, then please provide that, extend that hand out to us, extend the funding out to us, especially those who don't qualify for FAFSA. That's all I have to say, thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And Dinaska, do you want to, I know you kind of made that point earlier, but just talk a little bit about how we are unable in the federal way to do some things, but in the other ways we can.
Yeah, so Eric, I hear you, I hear what you're saying. And, you know, my office was also supportive of the efforts that AISSS was doing in outreaching and providing services and resources, and brought information about the Emergency Crisis Fund and the additional wraparound services, even talking about the laptops and hotspots that are available as part of that work that was happening. So we were a part of that effort. But I hear what you're saying, and this is where our office then serves as a hub for students who under the federal guidelines may not get the money, but we could use other resources at the university, across the university, in order to support online students, international students, our DACA and undocumented students.
if you can get that information to Berlin, that would really appreciate that. She's behind 3 months rent. And
Yes,
a lot
so
of the
I put
students
the
are
dean
using
of
credit
students.
cards.
Yep, I put the dean of students so she could email that there, or I'll even put my email address and she could email me directly.
Okay, I want to make a quick point because I'm hearing a lot of students voicing their concerns, and you brought up a good point. ASU libraries did offer to rent out laptops. Those laptops were old and outdated. They also did give out hotspot to rent out as well, which had 10 gigabytes per month. Those can't handle Zoom meetings. The data runs out really, really quick. So the students are having trouble trying to do their academic resources, research, and do Zoom classes with bad internet connection. But we're grateful that ASU was able to offer that a week late, in my case, because I got a laptop during spring break and I got internet the week after spring break. So my situation was when COVID hit and we converted online, as a student, I had to use my cell phone to attend Zoom meetings through a dial-up, and I had to use it at Starbucks parking lot, in my car, and cars aren't used to take notes. It's not an office setting. And I couldn't even see the professor's lecture slides, not to mention that we did not have printer access. Public libraries were shut down, as well as ASU libraries were closing. So we did not have printing available to us to access and print out our professors' lecture slides. So for me, I struggled blindly on my cell phone trying to attend classes. And I asked for help from ASU, financial aid, from student services, from ASU libraries. All I got was laptops, hotspot, do the best you can. So from my standpoint, the reason I graduated was from me. I supported myself. I took my own budget, which happened to be out of my food budget. So I skipped breakfast for 2 weeks because I had that money had to come from somewhere. I had to pay my internet. So that money came from my personal budget. And that budget meant I couldn't eat because it came from my food budget. These students made sacrifices. These students struggled and persevered through these obstacles without the help of ASU when they asked for it. All we got was do the best you can. And even now, as Joanne stated, this CARES Act funding that's available to students, you got that funding because of us, because we're enrolled during spring 2020. You used our Pell Grant enrollment as our numbers to get that funding, but we have no access to it because you guys are withholding it from us. So if you're not a student, listen to the students, help the students, tell administration, tell Crow, who is apparently too busy to come to this meeting and decided to send Joanne and you to represent him. Tell them what you hear at this meeting. Let them know that students of spring 2020, who are supposed to be the future of summer 2020 and fall 2020, are now second guessing their education because they have no support from ASU. Will they transfer to another university? Will they not come back fall? Will they withdraw? Will they never come back? That's the conversations happening in these households. We're struggling, and we're not like you where we can work from home. We're not like you where we work our butts off and we get a paycheck at the end of 2 weeks. No, we pay to work our butts off. And this money, you used our money. You used our Pell Grant, our numbers to get this money. But yet you're saying we're not eligible for it. You're taking that away from us. The United States Department of Education, Betty DeVoso, said this money is for people, students that their education was disrupted by COVID-19 pandemic. That's spring 2020 students. I have met so many students throughout my educational years from Haskell University, from Diné College, from NAU, from U of A, from UNM. I met so many students and they all got checks. They all got help. Some universities gave all 100% of their funding to students. They didn't keep a penny. ASU got the most in the whole nation, but it won't even help its students. It's students that are still in the state of emergency because we got no relief.
Yamilet is next to speak, and then Alexia.
Hi, I'll make this quick. So I just had a question. There have been concerns on the quality of education that ASU is able to provide for its students, considering the tuition that it is taking from them. I guess my question is, how can you assure that the quality of education is going to be the same or just as good online or in your, as you call it, immersion experience that ASU plans to implement? You are asking the student body to kind of blindly trust ASU and what they've collected based off really no research that I've seen. Not too much has gone into supporting professors from what I've heard. I've talked to a couple of professors wondering what they've been doing to prepare for the next semester, and I haven't heard much. Yeah, I guess my question really is just on how you can assure students that the quality of education is going to be what we're paying for.
So Yamilet, thank you for asking that question. And what I'd like to do, because to Eric's point earlier, we want to be here to listen, but what I'd like to do is share a link to a webinar that talks about our approach for the academic year, which will be different than this past spring, and certainly welcome after you all have a chance to view it, your feedback. And again, you can email me directly and provide us that feedback. Okay, so I'm gonna drop that in the link for you all now.
Is there anybody else that's talking, Bridget?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that well, I have a question. So why is it taking ASU so long to decide what is an equitable distribution of those funds? The CARES Act was signed into law on March 27th. So it's been more than 3 months almost since that's happened. And you can see where all this frustration is coming from. For 3 months, some of us have been behind rent. Some of us had absolutely no internet. We had no basic resources. We were low on food. We were low on basic resources that we need. Others struggled to find housing because they couldn't get it. There is no affordable housing in Tempe. And especially with that strange, non-refundable credit that basically was just money recycled back into ASU's pockets. It seems to me that ASU operates more as a business and much less as a public education institution. And that's unfortunate to say, but just through everything that we have seen, through all the frustration that we have seen from students, we were more like numbers. We are not cared for in the way that maybe you've seen other institutions just, give all their funds, all the CARES Act funding to their students. The thing is, like, what's the holdup? Why is it taking so long? And a second question that I had is why can't ASU use other funds to give to those students that are left out of the CARES Act funding? Because we know that is federal money, so it's understandable that it might not go to certain groups. But with the money that ASU gets from its undocumented students, from its international students, why is there no help being given to them? Where's their money when they pay as much as anyone else? So I guess those are my two questions.
So Alexis, we do provide support to them, and it is different, and we work collaboratively with financial aid and other offices to figure out what that package looks like. So again, if you're hearing from students that is not what their experience is, then please do share their name, but we are proactive in looking at that based on the information that we do have. So it's not the CARES Act, you are absolutely correct, but we do work to find funding in other ways in order to support our international online and documented and undocumented students.
And for the first part of the question about timing, I think the thinking behind that was that, again, back to that sort of original point of everything was already packaged through spring or through May. And then very quickly we worked on summer, which had already been in the works. And so the pressure didn't feel like it was on to get things finalized if the way we were going was to use this in fall. And so I don't have any better explanation than that. It's just that there seemed to be time to be able to work out what it should look like moving into the fall, which is why they're still in the process of working out the details.
The next person that's going to speak is Beryl. She's been waiting for a while.
Hi, thank you. I just have two comments, actually. First one is, according to the law, F1 visa holders can only work on campus, and we are not allowed to work off campus without any authorization. I don't know if you know about it. And I was working as a research aide on campus and paying my rent with that income. Since the campus is closed, I've been like really struggling with paying my rent. So international students should be really considered about this problem as well when it's come to funding. And my second comment is on when you all talking about the tuition, about in-person tuition versus ASU sync tuition. I had cleaning lab during the spring and we were unable to do our classes through Zoom. So the quality of the courses, they are not same as in-person experiences. I just wanted to point out that one. So the tuition should not be the same for the two different platforms. Thank you for letting me sharing.
I'm gonna put a new rule down so we can give people more time. I think it would be best if everyone limits their speaking time to maybe 1 minute, so that way more people can have an opportunity. And the next person that's going to speak is Jessie Howard.
Emily, that's you.
Hi. Yeah, sorry, I accidentally muted myself. Hi. I also would like to jump off of what Alexia said in the first part of her statement of questions. Is that obviously ASU students from spring 2020 looked at the CARES Act and interpreted that as them being able to, qualify for money back from the public institution that they pay. And yet somehow ASU read that as an opportunity for them to make more money by saying those who come back in the fall or those who come back in the summer, if they pay us money, we might be able to help them out with this CARES Act funding. So it seems to me like it is more of a business strategy more than it is a communal understanding of let's try and help everybody out. And so this idea that ASU considers them a new American foundation, we were discussing this in the last meeting. It would make sense that new and in stepping into the future would also consider taking care of community first as their first priority, and not thinking about only those who are able to continue school or those who will need to continue school because a lot of seniors graduated this past spring. Thank you.
There was actually a statement in the comment that a lot of students agree with. It says the CARES Act text states that the money sent to the universities intended for students is for emergency aid. Doesn't an emergency mean that the action should be taken quickly? Other schools distribute these funds months ago. Spring 2020 students are still students in emergency. When this law was signed, so they should be part of this too. That was not me, that was another student. And I don't know how ASU can dictate this CARES Act in its title, it says COVID aid relief, economic security. You guys can't dictate when the emergency is. You guys can't dictate when how COVID affects which students. You guys have a responsibility to these students. And if the federal government could give these students money straight up, just like they did the stimulus check, I think we would all be way, way better off than having ASU doing it. So if there's any more students that would like to speak, now's the opportunity. I'm actually going to follow the agenda, and we're going to actually go over some surveys and petitions information. So if you want to speak, you can raise your hand now. If not, then I'm going to go ahead and move forward. And obviously, housing is an issue, tuition refunds an issue, CARES Act money is an issue. This is a lot of stuff ASU has failed its students in. Its responsibility. So I hope you guys are taking notes. And I hope you guys are able to do something for these students. And it's not just us. These are just the students that had the courage enough to speak up. All right, moving forward to the agenda. We said that we were going to go over petition, and we only have about 20 minutes to do so until this meeting's over and everyone's going to get kicked out. So let's go over the survey that we sent out a couple weeks ago. And this is all student led. This is not student government. This is not ASU. This is students taking their own initiative to band together to do this. So we don't have a student org, but we are students of spring 2020. So I hope you guys can see this. This is the survey we sent, student evaluation of ASU's COVID-19 response. So 16 students responded. Hope it loads. Seems like we're having some technical difficulties. So I think I'm gonna have to exit and try to reopen it. Let me see if I can find it. Okay. Bailey, you have access to it?
I don't.
Okay, sorry. Trying to load it up. I think it's coming up. Responses. All right, here we go. Share it. Okay, 16 responses. Hopefully we'll be able to have it load up. Okay. So the first question is, how well did ASU help you transition from in-person to online classes during COVID-19? Majority said neutral. So they didn't feel good, they didn't feel bad. And both 5 students felt good, 5 students that felt bad. Going on to the next question. Select all the boxes that apply. During COVID-19, I struggled, and it had a list of categories. So the major one was they struggled with transitioning to in-person to online learning. That's 100%. They also struggled financially and with internet access, even with the 100 hotspots you guys handed out. They also struggled with housing and nutrition, new meals. So those are the top 5. Going on to the next question, did ASU inform you of their ASU's emergency financial aid grant? to help you with during spring 2020 transition due to COVID-19? 100% said no. Did ASU award you an ASU emergency financial aid grant to help you transition during COVID-19? 100% said no. Did you hear about the government, which is CARES Act, financial aid that was given to each colleges and financially help their students during COVID-19? About 50-50 said yes, 50 said no. What kind of aid did ASU provide you in order to complete the spring semester during COVID-19? So this one looks a little different here, but as you can see, there's a lot of NAs, none, 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 no help. So to see those answers better, we were messing around with it earlier. So we're going to bring it up so you guys can see the answers. So they said none, nothing. I've got $1,500 credited for moving out of my dorm by the due date given from ASU. None. Withdrawing from class under medical issues. Housing aid to pay a fee that I owe for printing. So Pat Tillman Center, American Indian Studies, did a wellness call check on me during COVID-19. I talked with them for an hour each. AISSS helped me fill out an application to apply to Native Health organization, and Native Health is not affiliated with ASU. It's a nonprofit organization in Phoenix. COVID relief fund with the $50 Bash's gift card. The gift card helped me with my family to get food and cleaning supplies. From ASU, all I got was administration and financial aid office saying the words, do the best you can. Some of my professors were understanding of my personal and family situations due to COVID virus. So they were not harsh on the deadlines, the assignments, the missing classes. Professors worked with me and talked with me and supported me during spring 2020 semester. None, none. Not only aid that was provided with was opportunity to talk to people about my mental health, wellness calls. None, none financially, support groups online help for mental health. So those are the responses there, mainly none. And the next question, how did you feel knowing ASU will not send out financial help from the CARES Act to students who were in school spring 2020 semester? I feel frustrated, forgotten. I feel like I'm not part of ASU's family. I feel like they don't care about me as a student. I don't think it's just, if the money is available for students, it would help immensely. Outrageous, infuriated, frustrated, sad, disappointment, betrayed, upset, irritated, mad. It shows that they truly don't care about their students. And instead they use the money for their own use when it was intended for students. As ASU should be held responsible for financial assistance as the CARES Act is intended to help students. ASU sucks. Not fair, cheated. I believe many students were unrooted from their dorms, jobs, normal lives, and should be compensated for it. Online classes were significantly cheaper than in-person classes, and I believe we have deserved extra funding for the resources that we no longer offered, such as gym, in-person tutoring, the writing center. We feel abandoned. We feel like we've been wronged. We feel as ASU is about the money, doesn't care about their students. It's made me wonder what else they were using this money for. I didn't even fully receive a concrete housing refund. But my tuition is another paycheck. I don't like it. The school gets enough money. The next question. What other costly issues have arisen for you during COVID during your spring semester transition. Internet, food, printing paper, printing ink, laptops, computers, adaptable mouses, adaptable keyboards, parking on campus to use the computer, Wi-Fi for classes, because I don't have that at my apartment yet. Losing employment, unpaid bills, overdraft fees, financial struggles, mental health issues, paying my monthly bills, no job, financial problems. I lost my job and it has a huge impact on how I was living my life. Also, my senior year was cut significantly short, and I'm not getting the graduation that everyone deserves to be able to. Transition from an in-person art class meant that I spent more out of pocket for supplies that would have otherwise been provided to me in person. Rent, insurance payments, including education that kept my LMT license, tuition. I will not graduate until spring 2021. So if you're so worried about graduation numbers, why aren't you helping this student that can't graduate? The next question, when you and your were you or a family member diagnosed with COVID-19? About 1/3 of them said yes. And part of that CARES Act is supposed to help students healthcare issues. And it doesn't help. I know one student that applied and asked ASU's financial aid for help because their family member got COVID-19 and she was the runner of the house. She called financial aid at ASU. The best they offered her was a student loan and she took it. Now she has to pay that and interest when this CARES Act money was sitting since March 2020. And the last question, well, the second to last question, are you a student? 100% said yes. The last question, is there any additional information that you would like to share? I'm disappointed that ASU has not released any information about the funds. ASU housing credit, $1,500. I believe ASU could have done more to help their students. I'm disappointed in the way our country is functioning, and I wish I could take more pride in at least how my school is functioning. I wasn't allowed to work for 2.5 months, and I'm struggling financially, more than I was expecting to be. So many new expenses out of nowhere. These are the voices that took our surveys, and yes, they're all students. So when I look at this survey, ASU doesn't have a good defense against why they're holding the CARES Act money and why they're not giving it to spring 2020 students. Other universities gave it out back in April, back in May, and back in March. And ASU students are still in a state of emergency. They got no relief yet. So that $1.2 million that you said ASU helped these students of spring 2020, and that article President Crow stated that we helped all our spring 2020 students. You don't got to worry about them. We took care of them. They're lying. The only people that are allowed to make that statement is a student. And these students are speaking up and they're saying that's not true. And the way you guys are handling this situation is very unprofessional. You're gypping these students out of tuition refunds, you're gypping them out of housing refunds, and now you're gypping them out of the CARES Act funding. You got the most money in the whole United States, but not one student got that CARES Act funding. That to me sounds like greed. That sounds like business. And it's affecting us students. And we will remember this. This ain't gonna be something forgotten. And now students are questioning. So I think on the agenda, the next thing we have stated is
I'm just really quickly, Savannah. and
ASU administration plan to resolve the issue.
I'm gonna go ahead and let Savannah Nelson speak really quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, really quick. To jump on that about the loans. In the last meeting that I was at regarding this issue, or one of the last meetings, with Brian Brayboy and Jacob Moore, they're in Michael Crow's. They're in the same office, and so I would expect them to know, and they did know all of the things that were up to date with the the funding and everything, and I was surprised to hear that there's this CARES Act, but then to find out more about it, like how can I get funding from that, because I'm in need, to find out that you have to go through like extra hoops. So taking out a loan, like you would have to go there first, if you're in need, and then they would, once you got that, then if that's not enough, then you would go to the CARES Act funding. So that's what I'm questioning, and I really never understood why, because it's like then you from the loans, then that just again, to reiterate, that just adds on debt in the long run. And now knowing like all this information that I'm finding out now, like the CARES Act being there, the funding being there for that long, is there any like what kind of changes are going to happen in order to now like get that funding? I guess that's the main question I have.
And so, Savannah, if I understood the question correctly, is sort of how will you be identified? And so that is what financial aid is working on, and making the packages and figuring out sort of the equation that they'll use to identify the students with the most need. Heavy emphasis, the point Jessica made earlier about Pell being part of the equation to see how much money colleges and universities were receiving. That will be also emphasized in the distribution of the monies, is my understanding.
I think she also stated, like, what does ASU plan to do going forward now that you heard us?
Yep. So I bet DNASCA did as well. I was taking notes, and so I will send them over to those in the financial aid office. In addition to, I do sit in the executive committee with the president. Savannah, you mentioned Brian Brayboy and Jacob Moore. I've been in touch with them as well. I think Annabelle may have joined us on the Zoom as well, if she wishes to speak up. I think it's important. It sounds like there was some really great support coming out of AISSS. And that should certainly be extended and acknowledged out into the space as part of ASU, but as a really diligent, and it sounds like active part, who was listening and meeting more of the need. And so I think that's another place where we can have information flow from AISSS up to the president's office through the routes that you mentioned, like Jacob and Brian as well. So we'll take this information back and give it to those that are finalizing the distribution plan for the CARES Act.
Do we hope to hear a response, as in what's the next step and what's the next meeting and who will be attending the meeting?
Yeah, so what I would anticipate is when we hear that the timeline is worked out, like I shared, I'm very hopeful. I really do hope I'm correct that we're only a week or 2 weeks out from finalization. And so maybe it would be good if I can get ahead of, if I have that information about when it is going to be delivered, is to have either a meeting, another Zoom, or something to discuss how it will be rolled out. Or if we do that right after, if I'm not quick enough that I don't hear it ahead of it being announced, that we have a very quick debrief after the information goes out. So one of the two would be my suggestion.
So my understanding, excuse me, my understanding of that is that the Arizona State University has to submit how they're going to distribute the funding that they receive to the United States Department of Education. Betty DeVoso is the secretary of that department. underneath the president. And so my understanding with that is, if you guys already develop a plan on how you're going to distribute that funds, once it's approved, you can't rewrite how you're going to distribute the funds. It's like applying for a grant.
That's correct.
Like any nonprofit university. So that's why we're trying to speak before that decision is made. And so if you're saying that you're going to get to us after that decision is final, then that means you heard us, but yet you're not going to make any changes.
We're taking the information
now.
Yeah, no, the idea was that the information gets there now, and then we have a follow-up conversation either right before that information goes public or right after that information goes public. But no, I'm not going to sit on the information.
I will also say that on behalf of like student government, tomorrow we'll be voting on some legislation that essentially urges the administration to take the following steps with their CARES Act funding. So like all 63.5 million should be spent on direct cash grants to students. The funding should be adjusted for need. Students who are enrolled in spring 2020 and summer 2020 semester no longer enrolled need to be eligible. And that the students excluded from CARES Act funding, such as DACA students, international students, undocumented students, or previously enrolled students no longer continuing or finish their education from spring or summer 2020, they need to be included from the administration's own funds. So that's what student government will be doing tomorrow.
And Daniel, that's exactly how it does work. Is I think you all know this, is we don't receive much funding from the state. And so ASU does commit, I can get you that actual millions of dollars amounts to all of the financial aid that you see that won't be covered in CARES Act is coming from all of these other sources, and much of it straight from ASU. ASU invests, I wish I had the number off the top of my head, but we're talking in the hundreds of millions of dollars range for financial support of students.
Yeah, our issue with that primarily is that that money is less accountable and it's less transparent. I mean, you yourself don't have the numbers because it is locked behind several walls of bureaucracy and like yearly financial distributions, right? Students themselves have trouble determining how much their own financial aid is from year to year, much less a holistic view of how much a university spends. And again, saying that a university invests X amount of money is kind of irrelevant when you also are not including how much money the university is making or otherwise is allocated from their funding, right? This is a very clear, very transparent amount of money that has been given to the school, 63.5 million. And hopefully the way that it will be spent will be very clear and very transparent. If what that means is ASU spends less money in their back end giving out financial aid and spends more of the CARES Act money to balance those books out, but we know that that money was distributed transparently, that's better for students than to assure us that don't worry, those students out there in the shadows are definitely getting financial aid, even though you have no mechanism by which to verify that.
There's a question from Asha.
Hi, I like to hear separate answers from Joanne and Cassandra. What does relief mean to you?
So this is where Jessica was talking about earlier, when students are dealing with a situation in the moment or a crisis in the moment, that they're looking for relief, and relief can take multiple forms. It could be money, it could be food, it could be housing, it could be clothing, it could be a whole host of different things. Even in academics, it could be different resources in the classroom. And so one of the things that I want to, share with you all, and I know some of you are already aware of this, is that is the role of the Dean of Students office. And for students to be able to, when they find themselves in a situation and they're seeking relief, that they could come to our office and that we could work with all departments across the entire university in order to be able to identify what is and what might be the said relief that's within our university structure. So I hope that answers your question. If not, I could elaborate some more too.
And Joanne, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So I would just put out there, it's providing support to release stress.
And based on those answers, do you think students have received that?
And to what you heard President Crow say, we have tried to meet the need of any student that has presented to us.
I was kind of hoping for like a yes or no question. So yes or no, do you think students have received your answers of relief?
I think that's really tough because I'm listening to you, and with what I feel in this room, the answer should be no. If you had asked me that in another moment, I would have said absolutely yes. So I'm torn. It's hard to say yes or no at this moment.
Okay, I think that wraps up our meeting for today. We've been on for about 2 hours and 4 minutes. Is there anything that was left unsaid that you would like I said, Joanne and Cassandra will both be meeting with higher ups to speak with President Crow, because we did send a letter directly to President Crow and all the deans of every college, and we got no response. And so then a week later, we followed up, and then Joanne is who President Crow sent to us. So him himself, I don't know if he's too busy or he's just ignoring us, but Joanne is what we got. So from this meeting, she's going to take everything to President Crow and let them know what she's heard today, as well as Cassandra. If there's anything that you guys feel that they need to hear, as you guys are students of spring 2020 semester, now is the perfect time to not leave anything unsaid. So I don't see any hand raises.
One thing I wanted to ask back to USG and the voting. Can you clarify how that's happening and what exactly that is for, and who's at the table for that?
What Daniel was talking about is we have a special Senate for USG. It's going to be tomorrow. If anyone would like the link to that, all Senate meetings are open to the public. And one of the pieces of legislation that we're going to be voting on is a CARES Act legislation, which is going to be advocating for some of the things that we heard here today. One of them going to be for ASU to give some of the CARES Act money to past students and not just upcoming students. There's also going to be some other things for ASU to release the full 63 million and not just the 35 million that they plan on giving out. So if anybody would like to attend, you can email me and then we can share that Zoom link with you. And you guys can also, as students, you do have speaking rights at these meetings. So you're also free to attend these, but yeah.
Yeah, this meeting tonight was student led. It was not a part of a student organization or part of USG. USG did help us today and as well as Wednesday to get us a webinar because they are supporting us because themselves are dealing with the hard time trying to get a hold of President Crow and any leadership on this topic, as well as other students. So we were the first ones to get a reaction out of ASU administration. And thank you guys for coming. I mean, you guys did it. It may not be President Crow, but this is who they sent. So hopefully next meeting, which I'm planning to have another meeting next Wednesday, as well as I'm attending the town hall. So if you would like to send a town hall, we have a Facebook page. I would also post their flyer up, and I will also email you. So if I don't have your email, or you did not get an email regarding this whole thing, please put it in the chat box privately to me, and I'll be able to get that down and send you guys updated information. The town hall meeting, I believe, is tomorrow. Is that correct? Bridget, is the town hall meeting tomorrow?
Yeah, it's not a town hall, it's a Senate meeting. So yeah, it's not going to be like this. If you have to speak, there's like 5 minutes at the end. But yeah, it is going to be tomorrow, and you can email me. I dropped my email in the chat if you would like the link to attend that.
Okay. So yeah, this is all students. This is just individual. 5 students got together and said, this is not right. And we have a voice. So thank you guys for voicing your concerns and attending this meeting. The more people we get, the more amplified it is, because this is a community problem, not just an individual problem. So I think that wraps up our meeting. Thank you too for listening and joining us and being able to hear our hearts pour out throughout this meeting. I think that's about it.
Thank you for trusting us. We appreciate that. Have a great night, everyone, and stay safe, stay well.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Jessica, for spearheading this project. Greatly appreciate it. I think a lot of us students are
Yeah.
same page. And thank you, Savannah, also for speaking up for the undergraduate population as well.
Thank you, student government, to be able to post this on webinar and share it on Facebook Live.
Wopi Latanka for everyone who helped out. Collaboration, one mind.